good, folks? Welcome into the first official episode of Fantasy Football and Finance podcast. I am your co-host, Jesse Moeller, alongside Mr. Prue Patel.
Hey, guys.
And we kind of wanted to give you a little bit of rundown of our background of ourselves. I have been in fantasy football for a long time. Going on almost 24 years now. I started in 6th grade. It's been something I've been very passionate about. So this is kind of my backgrounds. And yeah, the finance aspect was Prue's idea, and I'm going to let him touch base on that a little bit.
Yeah. I don't think I've been in fantasy football for as long as Jesse has. I think I'm going on to 13 years now. I started around college, but love football. Fell in love with the Baltimore Ravens when I moved to Baltimore. But yeah, the finance was interesting. You'll see us talk about sort of how this idea came to fruition from a trade that Jesse and I did in this episode. But we're trying something out of the box and combining fantasy football and finance, which have a lot in common than what most people think. So with that being said, we have to play our mandatory disclaimer.
Please note that the information provided in this podcast is for educational, entertainment, and informational purposes only. It should not be considered as financial advice, and we strongly recommend that you consult with a licensed financial advisor or professional before making any financial decisions based on the information provided in this podcast.
Glad that's out of the way.
Right. I am definitely not a financial analyst or advisor, so I can answer questions, but it's definitely not my strength, as you could say. That is where Prue comes in, as opposed to myself. But yes, just so you know, we are not 100% financial analysts, but we are just giving you ways to grow your money and succeed. Realistically, is what we're looking at.
Yep, we're just here trying to bring you, some of life experiences and some knowledge from books that I like to read. So hopefully it'll be beneficial, but like it says, always contact your professionals.
Yes. As with any knowledge you get, and this includes fantasy football, take it with a grain of salt. Go in skeptical. Don't just be like, oh, 100% because they said that. Do your research on your own. And if this is something you agree with us, then happily go along with it. But we want you to make those decisions on your own.
Definitely. You want to start with the trade that kicked it all off?
Yeah. So Prue and I are in, we both write for the League Winners. So you can follow them on Twitter at the League Winners, or you go to the website at theleaguewinners.com and you will see both of our written content there. So we've been with them for a while, and we got into a 10-team league. It is super flex, so it is a smaller league. I will touch on why that is important here shortly, but we will pull up the details of this trade that kicked off everything from this point forward. So here it is. As you can see, Prue's side is on top, mine is on bottom. He got Marquise Hollywood Brown, Wan'Dale Robinson, Treylon Burks, the 207, and I got Drake London and the 104 in this year's rookie draft. And why this is important, why I said this is league size is very important, because that affects your starting players and starting spots. So in a 10-team league, for me in particular, I like to get as many high-end assets as possible, because you have a limited amount of starting spots as opposed to a 12-team league, right? So you're starting less players, so they're more impactful. So if you are to pull up a lineup that is exclusively of those guys, like, you can literally dominate your league. In bigger leagues, it's a lot harder to do. I am in a 32-team league, and it is completely flipped from this 10-team league where people are starting Devontae Bookers of the world and stuff like that. But in this league, I had a lot of good depth because I hit on the rookie class last year, and it allowed me to combine my assets into condensing them into two superior assets, which I view these to be. So that is where I'm coming from on this trade. And in our league, it's a 10-team, and I think it's a start 10, if I'm correct, where that means there's 100 starting spots, where most leagues you're looking at 120 starting spots, and some have 144. But if you just notice, you shrink it down, those players like Christian McCaffrey's or the Patrick Mahomes, those guys, they have a bigger impact. So this was my mindset going into the trade. So that is where I came from, and I'll let Prue take over on his aspect of the deal.
Yeah, so I'll be honest here. When we were doing this trade, I completely whiffed on the fact that it was a 10-team league. But with that said, Jesse did point out that he had depth to go and be able to go do this kind of trade, whereas the team I had didn't have the depth. But I did have numerous 2023 picks, including the 101, the 103, and the 104. So I thought I had some leeways to take some of those elite assets and turn them into the depth pieces that I wanted. So when the trade came across, I pretty much thought, I'm trading 2 elite players for 4 wide receiver 2s, essentially. Mm-hmm. And it was creating the depth. Now my flex spots are secured, and that gives me the freedom to now navigate through this year's draft and then trades in the future, because now I have the pieces like Jesse did to go attack and get players. So I think that the depth was what I was going after.
And in particular, those wide receivers you targeted all have the potential to be wide receiver 1s on their own team, which is important because if you're not in an elite offense, you want the wide receiver 1 on a team. So, for instance, Treylon Burks, Hollywood Brown, and I know Wan'Dale Robinson's coming back from injury, but he's still a pretty good prospect. So he would be the third guy who has that option to be the wide receiver 1 on the team. And targets are what's important. So the ability to get the most targets, fantasy points, like that's. I'm a target truther, so I very much love all of those guys.
Yeah, I think the key was getting Hollywood Brown here, and I know you loved him. Mm-hmm. And he does get a bad rap in the community, the fantasy community, due to various reasons. Right, he played for the Ravens and had a very low passing volume under Greg Roman, and then he goes to Cardinals and he's lighting it up, and then he gets injured.
Right.
So, but you said it right. Like any 3 of those players can finish as a wide receiver 1 on their team, and on a week-to-week basis, I feel like all 3 give me a good chance for 1 to land in the top 12 that week, and maybe 2, depending on game script and whatnot.
Yeah, Hollywood Brown gets a bad rap because he's a quote unquote small boy, right? And people hate that with their wide receivers, but he's a stud. I don't get why he's around wide receiver 30 or whatever it is consensus in Dynasty. It doesn't make sense to me. He's undervalued and he's always been good. Like since he's stepped foot into the league, he's been a very productive wide receiver. He's dealt with injuries and he's been in bad offenses and stuff like that. But if you look at his data and his ability to earn targets, like it's some of the higher stuff in the league. So he's very much a buy low if like you can get him. I used him in this deal to package to someone where I view London as a superior asset because he put up a 29% target share as a rookie, which is unheard of stuff. Like people don't do that. And this is like the 4th time I've mentioned target share. So you can tell like that's kind of my thing. But yeah, so I consolidated the assets because I was trying to make a push this year. I have the pieces for it. So it was a deal that worked out for both of us. And those are the best type of deals where each side comes away with something that they prefer. So overall, I thought it was a good deal for both of us, where our team's at and where the directions they are going in.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and you outlined that in the article at theleaguewinners.com very in a thought and concise way, where each of our process and thinking went into the trade. The funny thing is the trade actually started for you wanting an earlier 2nd round pick. I believe it was the 204. And we kind of opened it up talks, and then eventually it was like, well, I kind of like Wan'Dale Robinson, and you said, well, I do kind of like the 104. So it kind of snowballed from that into this trade.
I like turning one-on-one deals into bigger deals if I can, because then you're not doing like 5 separate trades. you're basically getting all of your stuff that you're trying to get at once. And I am very much an impatient trader. Like, if we're talking trade and we're remotely close, like, I'm fine just being like, all right, what do we got to do to make this happen? Like, that's the type of trader I am. So we were discussing this back and forth. So I was like, well, hey, what about Drake London while we're talking the 104? Let's put all the eggs in the basket. Like, let's see what happens. And it took us a while, but we finally got something we both were happy with.
Definitely. And I think you were gunning for the 103, and I wanted to hold on to the 103. Particularly, I think this trade happened almost 6-8 weeks ago. At that point, I was sort of fixated on a rookie wide receiver, JSN. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose him. I could if the 102 doesn't go quarterback. But that's why we fell back to the 104 because I wanted JSN at the 103. Completely honestly, now I am sort of on the edge, depending on where Stroud and Young go. If they land in some promising spots, I may end up going quarterback because it is a super flex league.
Right.
So, but I do have pretty good quarterbacks in Jalen Hurts, Kenny Pickett, and Jimmy G, which I think those two, Pickett and Jimmy G, can serve as a quarterback too in the league.
Yeah, I am. My quarterbacks are good, but it's Kyler and his whole just ACL issue. So I'm relying on Geno Smith as my QB2 in that league. Why I wanted the 103 because I wanted to lock up Richardson. And this was back before Richardson becomes everyone's favorite QB1 in the class, where I was like, yeah, I'll take him at 102. And people were giving me side-eye looks. And I was like, listen, like, he's a rushing quarterback and he doesn't turn the ball over and he doesn't take sacks. Like, the floor is insanely high with this guy. Like, he may be a terrible real-life quarterback, but the fantasy production will still be there. So that was my thought process. And ideally, if he's still available at the 104, I'm going to smash take him. But I get the feeling he's not going to be anymore. I was happy with either like JSN or Jahmyr Gibbs at the 104 too. So like realistically, I had a top 4, and whoever fell to me at that point, I wouldn't have been disappointed. So I was like, okay, I can't get the 103. And you're like, yeah, the 104. I was like, that works. I'll take the 104. Like, I'm happy with those guys available there. Or realistically, the spot, like the value heats up on it, and when somebody wants the 104, I could deal it then too, right? Just because depending on who is there when I'm on the clock, somebody's gonna want that pick. Like, there will be a player because it's basically the top 6 where you include Stroud, Young, Richardson, Bijan, Gibbs, JSN, where somebody wants one of those guys. So it'll be fun to see how it shakes out, seeing if you get the guy you want, and then ideally I get the guy I want, which I don't think that's going to happen, but I would be thrilled if he fell to the 104.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to get both the guys I want. With the 101, I mean, that one's the most obvious. And I don't think anyone's going to be giving up what I seek for the 101. So that should be an easy pick to make. But I'm in the same boat as you. If like someone comes in with an offer with a 103, I might actually take it.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting when the draft day comes.
Yeah, because like you did a very good job of accumulating those picks over the last year, where you had the ability to maneuver them. Where you still have what, 4 of them in the top 10 this year, right? Because you have the 101, the 103, like the 109 and 106 or something.
The 109. Yeah.
Yeah, like you have a plethora of first round picks. And this is when people tell you to stock up on draft picks, this is why. Because then you could move some if you get a good deal, right? And so you're not being like, I only have 1 first round pick. It's like, yeah, then it kind of sucks. You don't want to move it. But if you have a bunch like you do, you have a bunch of assets where you're like, sure, let me get some impact players, or, and it'll be interesting. I'm assuming somebody at some point will offer you a very good deal in that league for Bijan, because Bijan is ridiculous. And I've been contemplating it, but I'm just like, man, it's going to cost so much. Like, I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, he's incredible. So yeah, somebody's going to want to pay up for him.
It's going to be a really high bar to pay because, like I said, I think this is one of 2 leagues where I have Bijan locked up, and that's not enough Bijan mustard for me.
Yeah, right. I know. I almost ordered his mustard just because I was like, yeah, that's a good market. I like the tactic you're going with here. So I probably will buy some. I need to get a Bijan chair for sure. Like we'll see what happens. I have a few 102s, so I'm kind of disappointed. Where I was like, I just missed it. I'm in one of my leagues. I missed it by like 20 points of max points, and I was so frustrated because some backup quarterback like Colt McCoy cost me the friggin'. Instead of cutting him, I kept him, and that cost me the 101. And I was like, I am so stupid. But you learn these lessons each year where you're like, yep, take that away. I will cut the guy next year. We're not going to do that again.
Right. Speaking of Bijan, so my other share is in a league where it's super flex, but you are only allowed to keep one QB at the end of the year, and you're only allowed to keep a QB 2 years in a row. So this year is where all the big name QBs have been flooded back in. So think Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, they're all back in the draft pool. And I had the 103, the 101 and the 103, I believe. Would you pick someone like Josh Allen over Bijan in that case, even though you only get 2 years out of him?
Yeah, I mean, he's incredible. So yeah, I mean, if you can get him for 2 years, I guess it depends on the trade market and how people view the quarterbacks, but it sounds like people are willing to give them up just because you're like, you got to flood them back in. You don't have a choice. So it makes it's a harder one to say yes or no to that. But like, who are your other running backs in that league? I guess I would be curious about. Like, who do you have?
It was like David Montgomery, Javonte Williams, Aaron Jones, I believe, and then some other RB2s that I don't remember.
So can you get a really good quarterback later in the draft still?
I'm going Bijan because I could. Last year I got Tua in like the end of second or the mid second round because a lot of the times in the league what happens is there's a push on rookies and then there's a push on quarterbacks. So I'm definitely going Bijan in that case. I was just seeing what your opinion would be with Josh Allen sitting there for 2 years.
I mean, it's real tough to pass on that. Like he's the legit difference maker. And it's super flex, you said too. So yeah, I would probably still take Allen, but I'm not going to fault anyone for like yourself taking Bijan just because you can lock them in for their entire career, right? Where you don't have this limited supply and you could go back and forth. It's just like Allen's going to give you 26 points per game. Like lock that in. That's just that's incredible. So I don't think there's a bad answer in that situation. Like you can lock in the 5+ years of Bijan, or you get Allen for at least 2. And go from there and see where your team ends up. And you'll probably look back in 2 years and being like, oh yeah, I made a great call, or oh, I made a terrible call, right? Like that's how it works where we look at it. So yeah, that's a pretty cool league and stuff like that. Where we say check your leagues and your league settings, this is why. Because some teams are like, some leagues have a third QB where it's called like, I can't remember, it's like a particular phrasing, but you can start up to 3 quarterbacks, right? So that completely changes the dynamic of the leagues. Or you have a 2-point premium in tight end league. So it's know your league settings before you draft or make trades or how many starting spots you have. Like all of that information should impact your trade or how you're valuing certain players. So keep that in mind. Because like when you get these Twitter polls or questions, people are like, would you take this player over that player? It's like in a vacuum, sure, but I don't know your league settings, and that can drastically change trades and how players are valued. So I think it's something more people need to like pay attention to.
Yep, definitely. And that can't be stressed enough, I think. A lot of the times people, post polls on Twitter or Reddit or wherever, and they forget to mention the contacts, right? It's like, is this a 10-team league? Is it a 12-team league? Is it a 14-team league, which are also popular? What's the rest of your team look like? So you're sort of getting feedback from the Twitterverse, but it's tainted. It's not the complete feedback you're looking for.
Right.
So take it with a grain of salt. And no feedback is better than bad feedback.
Yeah, so, the more information, the better. Because, like, for instance, in my 32-team league, we are starting 256 players. as opposed to some 8-team leagues, you're starting 80. So you'll immediately see the impact like players can have in those leagues. So like that's obviously the extreme version, but always keep that in mind with your league settings. Like they're essential to any trade. They're extremely important to know.
Definitely. And I think that's where the whole concept of tiers comes through, right?
Mhm.
Is you start creating tiers, and then now you can easily see your 14-team league impact versus a 12-team league impact, because you got tiers and you can see where the breaks happen.
Yeah. And that's especially when you're doing it across positions, because like a lot of people will just do tiers, individual tiers on like running backs or wide receivers, tight ends. But when you implement it into like quarterbacks versus running backs or wide receivers versus tight ends based on the league settings, then you kind of understand like George Kittle is worth DK Metcalf essentially or whatever, right? If it's a premium league or something like that, right?
Right.
So it's easier to know when you, and it's a lot of work to do the tiers, but when you have the tiers for each position based on the league settings, that's where you're able to kind of take advantage of the value differentials.
Definitely. Which actually ties into, the whole depth piece and accumulating future draft picks. Kind of ties into our financial topic. But before that, we got to play this little ad.
This podcast is sponsored by The League Winners. Check them out at theleaguewinners.com.
Awesome. Profit first. This is a relatively new business philosophy that I came across. And it's been a game changer for one of the small businesses that I own. So I'm hoping to just kind of get it out there for, people to use this philosophy in both their personal finances or if they own a small business. So let's see. Oh. So I want to caveat that in finance, a lot of it is dependent on the amount of time you have, right? If you're in your 20s, that's the perfect time to grow wealth because you got the rest of your life, and nothing beats time in finance, right? That's where compounding interest is very, very super powerful tool. It's literally the Patrick Mahomes is time and compounding interest.
Right.
So, and the other portion of time is, you got to plan for the future, right? If you're living in the now, but you have to plan for the future. You got to plan for retirement. You got to plan for your kids' college. You got to plan for whatever obstacles may come up. And it's similar to fantasy football, right? How many times have we had leagues where, owners go all in and all of a sudden they don't have any 2024 picks. So in 2024, they just leave the league.
Right. That's the worst because then it just completely throws the league in shambles. So yeah, if you don't prepare for your future, those are kind of the consequences you face based on those actions.
Exactly. And it like Jesse said, it's super frustrating when people do that. Same thing with finances. When you're not planning for your future, when you don't have a rainy day fund, or when you don't plan for the vacation properly, it's gonna feel that way. So we'll talk over profit first and what it means for small businesses first, and then how that translates into personal finances. But before we go into the concept, Jesse, I believe you have experience running a pizza place, right?
Yeah. So when I jumped into it because it was our general manager one day just walked away from the business and I was the assistant general manager. So our owner was like, "Hey, you want to do it?" And I was like, "I have no experience with this. Let me do it. Sure, I will try." And it was a disaster for the first 6 months as I figured it out, walking into all the issues that I didn't know existed in firsthand, and then trying to deal with them because I was not prepared for that situation. But it took me a while to get familiar with all of the financial aspects of it, documenting all of the data, figuring it out what works best for our company and like what I knew going in. So it was what they say a learning experience. And I say that's the nth degree where, yeah, it took a while to figure it all out for me.
Right. And that type of role is very hard. And as a business owner, I'm
Mhm.
always looking for the right managers because they make or break your team and your crew. How often did the owner come up to you and was like, "Hey, we need to cut expenses, or we
Right.
need to dial this down"?
All the time. So yeah, the owner, like as the owner, like what you're looking at is you're trying to save as much money possible, right? We're still putting out the same level of like whatever the product is. So from her aspect, she was being like, "Hey, can we cut this or can we like remove this?" And I'd be like, "This is essential. Like we cannot cut this. Like we need this, for instance. But certain things you can figure out ways to work around them and still save yourself money."
Right. So a lot of the times, owners feel that way because it's the philosophy that owners and us we've grown up with.
Mhm.
And the author for Profit First, Mike Michalowski, um, he sort of took an idea from the diet and health industry where you start allocating portions of your meal to the different food groups and you eat the nutrition ones first, like your veggies and your fruits, before you attack the proteins and the carbs. Because if you eat the proteins and the carbs first, you're gonna feel full, and then you may neglect your veggies and your fruits.
Mhm.
So similarly, in finance or in business, a lot of people say, "Okay, here's all my sales, here's all my income. Now I'm going to subtract all my expenses, and whatever's left over is the profit." Um, but what Mike did was he changed this equation and he said, whatever income comes in, you take your profit out first, and then you manage your expenses with whatever's left over. Um, and I'm guessing Jesse, you're the owner of the pizza place. She probably did her accounting this way, right? Where it was income minus expenses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then they would figure out how to generate whatever profit she was making, right? And reinvest it in the business or invest it in marketing or whatever aspect she wanted to invest it in.
Right. And I would challenge you a lot of the times at the end of the year, that profit is minimal.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is you got a bank account, your money's going into, your money's going out of, and you look at it. And when you're profitable, you see money come in. And as an owner, you get in the mindset that, okay, maybe I can, splurge on this marketing campaign for $2,000, or maybe I can pay this NFL running back $5,000 for a video post, because you start thinking that it's going to give you an ROI because your word is going to go out there, your marketing is going to go out there, but you really never budgeted for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your expense is growing and your profit is minimizing.
Mm-hmm.
So what Mike did here was he put in a system where you create 5 accounts, right? Your number one account is your income. That's where all your sales come in and hit that account. But what you start doing after they hit your account is, instead of paying your expenses from that account, the first thing you do is you allocate 10% to a profit account. It could be 10%, it could be 5%, it could be whatever number your industry, the business is in. For example, in our smoothie place, we started off with 5% when I learned of this concept.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew I couldn't take off 10% right away.
Yeah.
And I wanted to grow it to 10%. So then once you take that 10% off and you set it aside for profit, you start allocating all these other accounts, operating expense,
Mm-hmm.
owner's pay if you're working as an owner in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And then your taxes. A lot of times owners don't set aside taxes when they report income at the end of the year. All of a sudden they've got, a $10,000 tax due.
Yep. That happened in my store. My owner was paying taxes to the wrong city and realized that very quickly, like that was wrong. So they had to adjust who they were paying taxes to. And it was a huge issue for our business for like 2 years.
Yeah. And what Mike is saying is a lot of the times that tax is coming out of the owner's pay
Mm-hmm.
because they hadn't allocated money away from it. So he's saying, just take out and put money into taxes. Let's say at the end of the year you have 15,000 in your owner's taxes, and you only owe 10,000. That's $5,000 more profit there.
Exactly.
So it's essentially the same thing for personal finance, right? You're setting up a similar process. You're setting up 5 accounts. In this case, your income is your W-2. How often do you, Jesse, take your W-2 and allocate it to different things like, hey, we're planning a vacation. Let's take, 10% of our paycheck and put it into an account so we have enough money when we want to buy the tickets, when we want to buy the hotel.
Right. If we have planned it out, we will do it, but we don't always plan it out. And then
Right.
the issue becomes like, hey, we didn't budget the money for this. Like, where's the money going to come from? And then we have to scramble to find it. So, yeah, it can be a problem from time to time for sure.
Definitely. And that's one of the biggest benefits I've seen personally is we love taking vacation as a family.
Mhm.
So we already planned out a Hawaii trip next year. So now I'm like, all right, we got 12 months. Let's take this percentage and start putting it into our splurge account, right?
Yep.
That's where that money will go. So in this case, in your personal finances, your income is your W-2 check or your 1099, however you're getting money paid to you, and you're putting 20% into investment. That's your profit. Investments are your personal profits.
Yeah.
Similar to draft picks,
Mm-hmm.
right? If someone told you, if you were able to accumulate 3 2025 first round picks right now, that value is just going to go up, is it not?
Yep, 100%. They are very much devalued, and this is the way people think about it, and why it applies to finance, because it's gonna go up. Like there's no way around it. That money will make itself for you.
Right. And the reason investments are profit for you is you're now taking money and you're making your money work for you, right? It's just not sitting in a bank account yielding no interest or yielding minimal interest. You're putting it in a high yield savings account, or you're putting it into a 401k or a stock market, somewhere where it's going to make money.
Yep.
Obviously there are downs, you do have where the stock market goes down, but in the long run, in the time that it takes, in the long run, you will realize profits. So that's basically the principle here is you take the income, you put 20%, 10%, 5%, start off with 1%, but do it. Just make yourself move 1% of your W-2 paycheck to an investment account.
Mm-hmm.
Then, the rest to your bills and your emergency fund and your splurge accounts, right? What's that going to do for you is now your bills are going to hit your bills account, and you're going to have less money in it than you did from your paycheck.
Yeah.
So it's going to set off a little trigger in your mind that says, wait, I don't have that much money to pay all my bills. Are there some places I can cut costs? Instead of reaching into the other accounts, figure out creative ways to reduce your bills. If you have Netflix and Hulu and YouTube TV, a creative way would be, why not have Netflix for 3 months out of the year, cancel it, go to YouTube TV 3 months out of the year, cancel it, go to Hulu for 3 months out of the year, right? You're saving money that way.
Mm-hmm.
And for business owners, it's the same thing. Your bills is your operating expense. You're gonna start realizing where you can actually cut costs, and you come up with creative ways to reduce your operating expense. One of the things I like to ask is, let's say in the next 5 years you accumulated $25,000 in your investment. What sort of investments would you want to do, Jesse?
So for myself and my family, I would like to put a good amount of that away for my daughter, and then some of that in some of the funds I'm already invested in, and then I would share the rest with my wife, and we would have our own investment with that too. So I would put it into 3 different aspects, but basically it would be long-term investments is how I would be looking to invest that money.
Perfect. I think you hit it. Key was putting your investment into your daughter's accounts, because that is an investment that's going to pay off.
Yes.
One thing that other people don't think about is maybe you got money in the stock portfolio, you got money in the 401k. Why not look into a small business,
Yeah.
right? Investing in a small business, become that owner. And in a future episode, we'll talk about creative ways to increase your income.
Mhm.
But prior to doing that, I think putting this process into place builds that foundation, right? That lets you do so many things. And like we talked during the trade portion, right? I had a lot of picks. Jesse had a lot of wide receivers. We used our invested players and picks and made moves accordingly to better our teams. Same thing applies to finance. And if you have this process in place, you'll have the money and the financial freedom. It may be difficult for the first 12 months, but after that, you're going to start realizing soon enough that this has so much benefit to your personal finances and growing more financially free in your future.
Right. And it may be, as you're saying, like a short-term hit for a little bit, but you have to think of the long picture with this. So in the short term, you might be like, oh man, it's a little difficult. It's like, yeah, but are you able to do it? If you are, you will reap the rewards long term from the situation. So that's kind of what the main goal we're hitting at here.
Exactly. And if you want to, go read Mike Michalowski's Profit First book, there's going to be a link in our description. And it'll take you right to Amazon, and the good thing with the link is it'll take you to his book, but then you can scroll down. It'll have Profit First for contractors, Profit First for salons, Profit First for the freelancers, and it'll have different books that other people have applied the process to their business.
Oh, that's good. I didn't know that. So that's good. Like it basically tailored to whatever your walk of life is, which is nice to know.
Exactly. The funny thing is I actually came across this term on Twitter. A financial advisor, Rachel Camp, she has really good contacts. She put out a tweet, I think it was yesterday, where it said it totally changed her life when she accepted reverse budgeting. And I like that term, reverse budgeting. And essentially what she said was reverse budgeting is you're taking your paycheck, putting a portion to your investments first, then paying your bills, and then doing your splurges after that. And I commented, I'm like, oh, that's profit first for personal finances. I love the term reverse budgeting.
Right.
So,
yeah, because it flips how a lot of people are investing. So yeah, that's why it makes sense.
Exactly. The last piece of the process is you basically select 2 days. And in the book, he says the 10th and the 25th of each month. And those are the days you allocate the percentages from your income account to all your other ones. What that does is now once you start paying your bills, let's say on the 11th or the 12th and the 26th and the 27th, depending on the weekend or depend, it consolidates how often you have to do bookkeeping, right? Now you can just open it up twice a month and say, okay, do I see a bill that I'm not used to hit this month? And automatically it's a real quick gut check on, hey, am I paying for something that I'm not supposed to, right? You may have signed up for a subscription 2 years ago and that you might be still paying for, and it gets washed away in the transactions. So that's sort of the last piece of this puzzle is once you set the accounts, you want to do the transfers automatically on 2 days out of the month.
Yeah, whatever 2 days work for you. Yeah.
Exactly. Once you have this foundation, right, similar in fantasy football, once you have depth at wide receiver or depth at picks, you're able to take risks that yield better money making habits and will yield better situation. You may be able to buy a rental property in the next 3 years, and enjoy the financial freedom that a lot of people seek. So with that, I hope you come back and we'll be talking about other finance situations. We'll talk about, out of the box ways of making income in the future. But the key thing first is you got to put this process in place, right? If you put this process in place, and when you start making more money, if you start looking at additional incomes, a side hustle, a rental property, and implementing this process, even when you start making loads of money, it's just going to grow that much faster.
Right. So yeah, that's the most important part, and what we want you to take away is kind of restructuring and rewiring how you go about your finances and investments, and make yourself more money in the long-term situation, which is what everyone should aspire to.
Yep. And just like in fantasy football, where you try to get those 2025 picks now, which are going to increase in value, you want to do the same thing in finance. And like we said, there's a lot of similarities with how you run your fantasy football leagues to your personal finances and your future finances. So definitely stay tuned. In the meantime, definitely check out the book at the link below, and then definitely check out the League Winners. It's a great group of authors providing year-round articles.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will drop the podcast link. You can find it on any streaming service. You can find myself on Twitter, JMolero5 down below. Any social media, I will be there. You can see the rest of my work as Rantings as a Fantasy Football Fanatic and all of the written work of the League Winners. Prue, why don't you tell them where to catch yourself at?
Yep, definitely. Same thing at the Prue Patel and on Twitter mainly. We're coming out with some exciting stuff at the League Winners, and I'm working on a side projects with them. So stay tuned.
All right. Take care, folks.
Bye-bye.